So for my topics today is about the technique of the Onyx administration of DMSO, DBOH material. So the important aspect is just for a review of the properties first to have a better understanding of the Onyx and also the other important aspect that we have to understand. That's for a long time usage of the Onyx in the brain AVM, dural AVM, epistolars, spinal, head and neck, extremity, and also the visceral hemorrhages, and recently in the L descent gravel endoleak or aneurysm repair, which is maybe by the endovascular or percutaneous approach. The properties of the Onyx solution, for the main property is it's a non-adhesive liquid material which is composed of a solid polymer dissolved in the DMSO solvent, and they use tantalum for opacity, which is visible on the fluoroscopy. The mechanism of the treatment is the solidification or solidified and hardened by dispersing of the solvent into the bloodstream or to the surrounding tissue that makes the ethylene vinyl alcohol become thicker and thicker. This is the properties of the structural chemicals of the Onyx, which consists of the ethylene vinyl copolymer, which is quite rubbery and have a dark appearance like this. So the DMSO is an organic solvent which dissolves the EBOH, and then it has some of the specific properties, which is a little bit of acidic, pH of 3.5. The viscosity is about 1.1. It's flammable, and it's used for the base of the many medical solutions. There are three preparations of Onyx nowadays. The first one is the 18, which is 18 times the viscosity of the water. It's a central stone 18 times. For the blood, it's about 5. So, but the concentration is about 6%, which causing the viscosity of 18. The Onyx 34 is 34 times thicker than water, and have a concentration of 8%. And then we have Onyx 34L, which is high viscosity but with low opacity to see the inside of the big lesion when the Onyx superimposed or the cast. And also it reduces the hardening artifacts on the scanner that we can have a more friendly follow-up imaging. The viscosity of the solvent is important. We have a 1834, which is suitable for various lesions. For example, for the low flow lesion, we use a low viscosity and low concentration. For the high flow lesion, usually we tend to use a high viscosity and high concentration of Onyx. Another important factor is how we visualize during the case. Of course, we have to have the high contrast setting of the display of the image acquisition and have a high resolution subtraction fluoroscopy with the optimal frame rate of 7 to 15, or the optimal one to reduce the dose, and also have a very fast subtraction reset for the roadmap fluoroscopy, and have a proper collimation to reduce the radiation, and have the timer and clock for time monitoring. Just like this example, we have to use the progressive subtraction fluoroscopy to see the column of the chronic of the Onyx progress into the lesion, to see new deposition and the migration sequentially on time. Because if we don't have the subtraction fluoroscopy and reset every time, the cast of the Onyx will superimpose on each session. So it becomes very difficult to track the progression of the Onyx. That is one. At first, when we inject the Onyx, we have to pause a little bit to let the Onyx settle down and solidification partially, and then pause and inject again to get to the other portion of the nidus. And then finally, we can get the whole portion of the nidus or AVM. Okay, and we have to use the proper tools also with the compatible microcatheter with the many variations to our purpose. The principle of injection of the Onyx is the progression of the columns. Columns propagate inside the lesion if the injection pressure is more than the resistant pressure inside the lesion. That will cause a forward penetration of the nidus into the lesion. And reflux usually occurs when injection pressure is less than the resistance within the nidus or within the target tissue. And then the DMSO disperses into the surrounding tissues, into the bloodstream or any environment, and produce more solidification of the Onyx column with increased holding pressure. And then we pause, and then we inject again. In this manner, we can control the direction of the Onyx injection. For the small channels and slow flow, usually the structures or architecture of the lesion will have a very high resistance. For the large channels with high flow, it becomes like a low resistance model. And we have to pause and resume injection during the session to find the space filling of the other portion of the lesion, especially for the AVMs. Reflux occurs if the resistance is higher than injection pressure. The other principle is principle of flow arrest, just like the injection of the NBCL or glue, the creation of material reflux to block inflow or just create like a pseudo inflow arrest. And the optimum length of the column to overcome the resistance. If we have a lot of resistance, we may have to use a very thick or longer reflux column to help propagation of the Onyx column. The maximum time of injection is usually 60 to 90 minutes if you use a non-detachable catheter, but for detachable catheter, you can wait longer than that, depending on the situation, and then remove the catheter. This is the example of the models of the blood vessels. We have a feeder coming in and have an inside small branches feeding into the nidus. The smallest one, the middle one, and the largest one. When we inject the Onyx is like a viscous substance that will try to seek the lower resistant channel first. And in this case, we can see that the Onyx will get into the large channel first because of the low resistance. When we inject more after waiting, the head of the column of the Onyx in this area become exposed to bloodstream and the larger environment, and the DMSO disperse out and making the column thicker. So this become more solidification in this portion. And then when we inject again, the Onyx find the other channels or the ways that it doesn't have the previous plaque blocking in. So if we have a proper pause and inject, the Onyx will migrate into the other components of the nidus or the feeders. Like this one may move a little because of the partial solidification of this portion. But this portion has a small channel, so in this channels, the liquid is still in the inside the channels, and then this one is a bit bigger. So this way, we can predict that and can control how the Onyx will propagate into the nidus system. Okay. This is another example of the complex AVM, which have in this one, you have multiple small compartments or channel inside. So this will represent a high resistant model. If we inject the Onyx inside, it will face a high resistance. So first, how to solve this problem? You have to make a plug a little bit, like a push-a-plug technique, to have some of the reflux to actually encase the catheter, and then building up the pressure and wait for a few seconds or few minutes to let this one hardening. And then we inject again, so that we have the pushing pressure more than the resistant pressure and can drive the Onyx through. We can predict that for the next injection, the Onyx probably migrate or propagate into this portion of the nidus first because it is of a larger caliber and have a low resistance, like this. Maybe a little bit more of the reflux. And then after this, when the Onyx is just reaching the venous side, at this portion, the DMSO is dispersed out faster than this portion. So this becomes partially solidified. And then when we begin injection again, this one is acting like a cast and push the Onyx into the smaller channels. And then again, we can predict that the Onyx will migrate or propagate into the larger channel inside first, like the same principles. So by this way, we can approximately or can predict how the Onyx will penetrate into the nidus, into which components or which compartment first. So it is quite important that we analyze the angio architecture inside the lesion carefully, so we can control the injection the way we want. For example, like this one, we don't want the Onyx to migrate into the venous component too much, so we have to wait a little bit until the MSO disperses out and this become more solid, and then pause, inject the same with the inside compartment again. Just wait a little bit, letting this one disperse out and become a little bit more solid, and then we inject again. So it will come down into the smaller portion like this one, and repeat the whole process. Like this example, this one, the catheter is quite far away into the almost a wedging position into the nidus. This way, we can have like a partial flow arrest or almost flow arrest of the solution, and we can inject the onyx quite easy like this case. It's just about a 10 to 20 seconds pause between each injection. So then the onyx migrate, and then you can get the whole fistula inside. So this is the final case. You can see that sometimes there may be some of the reflux back into the anastomosis and into the other feeders. So this way you can get the whole AVM from just one feeders. This is another brain AVM that using the same technique, push and plug and then pause again. In this way, you can get to the different compartment which have a different resistance and get the whole nidus eventually. Like this one, this is the example of the whole nidus. Some of the problem is that the onyx is opacified by tantalum, so sometimes the superimposed cast may obscure the inside structures that sometimes is quite hard to determine whether this is complete or not. You have to use a multiple projections or use a lower density onyx. This one for the spinal, more like of the body applications. In this one, we use the onyx to arbitrate the fistulas here, which is straight from the spinal artery and which anastomosis too. So this one get a microcatheter in and pushing in the onyx. One of the advantage of the onyx is that it induces less resistance and also less spasm or the burning effect of the glue when we use in the spinal pathway like this one. So you can see that just after embolization with control angiogram, still the spinal artery is still patent, not like the glue, which is usually cause spasm or with the heat irritation on the vessels. So, and also the application in the body intervention, like in this case for the renal AVMs, which had quite a lot of feeders inside. Anyway, this lesion can be embolized with glue or with onyx. This one, we choose the example of the onyx that you fill most of the space with the feeders, complex feeder, the nidus, and part of the draining vein, and we get the whole fistula out. So another application which is developed recently, 3 or 4 years away from now, this is the example of the after treatment of the aortic aneurysm with the aortic stent graft. And usually one of the common problem is the endoleak type 2 or 2B, which becomes because of the residual cavity in the aneurysm that is fed by the retrograde feeding from the segmental branches, lumbar arteries, or even from the hypogastric artery, internal iliac arteries, with the anastomosis backward into the cavity of the aneurysm, which sometimes is still a pattern. In this way, we can use a microcatheter to retrogradely catheterize into the sac of the aneurysms and inject the onyx. The same principle, try to obliterate the cavity with some of the reflux back into the other side of the retrograde feeders, so we can get the whole cavity. This one is still not finished. So if we inject a little bit more and have some reflux back into the feeding arteries from the other branches or another segmental anastomosis, which is quite common in the abdominal or thoracic aorta, we can close the aneurysms quite efficiently with that you don't have to close the whole of the sac with a large amount of coils or glue. Another approach is bypassing all of these hassles of catheterization by using a percutaneous approach with the ultrasound or CT guide to get directly into the residual sac of the aneurysm and then inject the onyx. One of the advantages is that we can always remove the needle without sticking because of the properties of the onyx and the metals right here. But still we have to prime the needle with the DBSO and keep injecting until the same principle, getting into the another branch, filling the cavity. Sometimes if you place position of the needle properly, you can use just a little amount of the onyx to cover most of the branches. But sometimes you cannot reach the pocket that is close to the feeder. Sometimes you have to inject quite a lot of onyx to have a good reflux back into the feeding arteries. So this is an example of the case of the endoleak type 2 in this one. The sac is quite typical to be approached by using the transarterial. So we decide to use the percutaneous injection by placing with the ultrasound guide and CT guide of the Onyx and inject that into the cavity and then back into the one of the segmental branch of the aorta, the costal arteries, and then inject the Onyx and then test again until we have a complete obliteration of the aneurysm sacs with evidence of refluxing back into the one of the feeders. So anyway, if we are using the plug and injection technique, because in some cases we cannot use the balloon, or if we are, for example, like in the complex cases, the assistant is quite important because they have to remind you of the excessive reflux or migration of the Onyx. That is one of the maybe disadvantages of using just the distal catheterization and not the balloons, which I think Dr. Liu maybe explain to you better. So in summary, the Onyx is an injectable fluid that is quite controllable and it has many using indication, but we have to be careful about the properties of the concentration, viscosity of the Onyx, with the proper preparation, handling, and practice, and a proper case selection, and also the proper technique to see the Onyx, and have some experience for the optimum reflux of plaque formation, proper timing, and optimal push injection to have the great use of the Onyx in the peripheral intervention. Thank you very much.